I don't care if it's illegal. I'm going to do it until someone sues me. Nobody is going to tell me what I can or can't do in my city. I was a little stunned by the statement. I mean, I shouldn't have been. I'd been around long enough to know that politicians had a very different view of the world than regular people, and especially cops. To them, the United States Constitution was a barrier to their goals and desires. I always saw it as protections against the government and a document I had sworn to uphold and protect. That's one of the things that made the Founding Fathers so special, their foresight. They recognized, having lived through just such abuses of power, that future politicians likely wouldn't have the same desires for liberty and freedom. So they created the most influential document in human history. And I just sat in a meeting with the highest elected official in our city who knowingly, willfully, and vehemently expressed his intention to violate the rights and freedoms of the citizens of the United States and the state of Indiana. You could call it hubris or stupidity, but what it was, and I could see it in his eyes and expression, was just meanness. The elected leader of the city had decided that not only did he know better than all those great men who founded our country, but that he was going to make decisions in his best interest and not those of the people who elected him. He was doing it out of spite. I would love to have said that everyone in that meeting disagreed with him, shouted him down, and abandoned him as a leader, but that didn't happen. A very few did speak up, fewer still stepped down, but far too many continued to follow an unethical leader. Sadly, it wasn't the first time in history, and it will not be the last. It's time to start telling our own stories. I'm Steve Kellums, and welcome to Blue Canary. Ethics in leadership. It's an interesting topic and at times can be very controversial. Peter Drucker was an Austrian American management consultant, educator, and author whose writings contributed to the philosophical and practical foundations of modern management theory. He famously said, "The only definition of a leader is someone who has followers." This statement has led to some interesting classroom discussions as well as arguments about leaders. In my courses, I typically lead with a few definitions of leadership and then ask the class a question. I ask them to give me a list of good leaders. What follows is an interesting take on leadership. We will typically start with George Washington, Mahatma Gandhi, Winston Churchill, Abraham Lincoln, and then the class will typically throw in a George Patton, Bryant, and then a modern president. Which president, however, is based on where the class is being taught. This is where the arguments start. Leaving the list of good leaders on the board, I ask the class for a list of bad leaders. This list starts with Adolf Hitler, followed by Joseph Stalin and Pol Pot. Jim Jones and David Koresh are added as the class's input starts to wind down. And then someone will throw out the name of the same modern president that was on the good list. Defining leadership as someone who has followers might be accurate from a technical point, but it fails to address what I believe is one of the major elements of leadership: ethics. Those leaders in the bad list are leaders. They moved countries, cultures, and peoples to do some truly horrific things. But I could never look at them as leaders because to me, ethical leadership is the most important element. I believe that ethical leaders can lead anyone, but unethical leaders only lead unethical people. The rest, they will drag along against their will. Let's take a look at ethics, morals, and ethical leadership. Ethics is the study of the general nature of morals and the specific moral choices to be made by the individual in his or her relationships with others. It's the moral sciences as a whole, including moral philosophy and customary, civil, and religious laws. It's the rules or standards governing the conduct of the members of a profession, society, or culture. This definition leaves a lot of room for cultural differences. What one culture may see as being acceptable behavior, another might consider abhorrent. So understanding that ethics can fluctuate and change is important. When we look at the definition of morals, we find more solid ground. Morals relating to dealing with or capable of making the distinction between right and wrong in conduct. It is being good or right in conduct or character. Right and wrong. Good and bad. A moral person knows the difference. An ethical person strives to be good and right in conduct or character regardless of culture. An ethical leader strives to move people physically, spiritually, and emotionally to make good decisions, to display good behavior, and to work for the common good of society. Harvard University defines 6 main principles of ethical leadership. Let's take a look at those. 1. Respect. While historically respect was demanded by the bosses with little attention paid to the contributions of the officers, the ethical leader sees respect as a two-way street. Mutual respect leads to a healthy workplace and empowers the officers to make decisions and solve problems. This allows for the line officer to better serve their community and provide services that are needed and wanted at all levels of society. When the leader respects their followers, the followers will in turn respect those they serve. This will build a stronger community. The opposite of this is when the leaders do not respect their officers. This will have a trickle-down effect that will cause the officers not to respect the community, creating barriers to communication and service, resulting in a failed community. 2. Accountability. An ethical leader will hold themselves accountable for their actions. They're not afraid to acknowledge mistakes and can quickly change direction when they recognize they are no longer on the right path. Ethical leaders will make decisions based on integrity and honesty. They're also not afraid to share the rewards and accolades with their employees. They don't look to place blame, but focus on problem solving. This is one of the hardest things for human beings to do. It is very difficult to hold yourself accountable, often because you'll fail to see the errors of your decisions. A good ethical leader will surround themselves with people who will hold them accountable. These are opposite the traditional yes men. They are followers who are not afraid to challenge the leader and force them to take a critical view of their actions. For true accountability, the leader needs help. 3. Service. Ethical leaders keep their employees, customers, and community at the top of their decision-making matrix. They truly care about their people and make decisions that put their quality of life first. In public safety, this not only means the officers and civilians working for the department, but the people that call for assistance every day, as well as the overall community and community needs. Ethical leaders build family atmospheres and don't just look at employees as furniture, but as valuable and critical members of the team. Ethical leaders will also encourage their employees to be community-oriented and allow them to be involved in events and organizations that foster the community-first mindset. Everything from sports clubs and philanthropy organizations will be a focus for the ethical leader, and that same focus will make its way into the employees' everyday activities. 4. Honesty. Transparent leaders build trust in an organization. The same elected official I spoke about in my opening came into office with a promise of transparency. His platform was filled with the word. He claimed he was going to open the doors of City Hall and make all of the decisions in the public forum. The first thing he did was put an opaque covering over all of the conference room windows in City Hall. That's right, the exact opposite of transparency. His leadership heralded a new age of secrecy. That's about par for the course when it comes to campaign promises. To build and maintain trust, leaders must be good communicators who speak openly and honestly about issues. Regardless of the issue's severity or unpopularity, leaders' responsibility to be clear and candid empowers others to make the right decisions with the information they have. Without trust or honesty, a leader will never be able to move people, and that will seep into the rest of the organization. A dishonest leader will breed a dishonest organization. 5. Justice. Ethical leaders are not just about following the law, but about ensuring that everyone gets what they deserve. You might believe that we are talking about procedural justice. There is more to this than that. Procedural justice refers to the idea of fairness in the processes that resolve disputes and allocates resources. It is a concept that, when embraced, promotes positive organizational change and bolsters better relationships. Procedural justice speaks to 4 principles, often referred to as the 4 pillars: fairness in the process, transparency in actions, opportunities for voice, impartiality in decision-making. Interestingly, the concept of procedural justice is pushed heavily on law enforcement agencies from the outside, but that is one concept that public safety understands and embraces. The blind lady holding the scales is a powerful symbol. The ethical leader will embrace the concept of procedural justice, but also understand that sometimes the machine doesn't solve the problem. Sometimes, no matter the law, you have to do the right thing. The ethical leader understands when the process must be set aside and the organization must do the right thing. 6. Community. Ethical leaders view their companies as communities and consider everyone involved when evaluating situations and making decisions. By viewing their organizations this way, they build equity and inclusion into the decision-making process and create work environments that encourage collaboration across teams. But it's more than just community. The ethical leader looks at the organization as family and works hard to instill a family dynamic within the department. Followers want to feel as though they are part of a family, and as the organization creates its own sense of family, the community it serves will greatly benefit from their care, concern, and protection. These 6 principles of the ethical leader are something each of us can work on and improve during our leadership journey. But we quickly covered one thing that is incredibly important to ethics and leadership: doing the right thing.
The Legal Liability Risk Management Institute is the nation's largest provider of liability and risk management services in the United States. Our goal is to help reduce liability, reduce lawsuits, and enhance officer performance. Regardless of the size of your agency, we have a risk management solution. You may contact us at www.llrmi.com or call 317-386-8325.
Doing the right thing. For many, that can be a challenge, particularly in a profession that focuses so heavily on procedural justice. These are the steps. These are the outcomes. Nothing else matters. But it does. Sometimes those steps and procedures, that process and those outcomes don't actually solve the problems we face. Sometimes they make it worse, and sometimes by being right, you're actually wrong. So you must always keep in mind the idea of doing the right thing. How do we do the right thing? We start by setting aside illegal choices. We've sworn an oath to uphold the law and defend the Constitution. Breaking the law isn't an option. But remember, you have discretion. Police discretion is the power given to law enforcement officers to make decisions in the course of their duties based on their judgment and experience rather than on strict rules or regulations. Then, we do the right thing. Doing the right thing requires 3 steps. You must want to be ethical, you must be acting on good intentions, and you must be able to think rationally. We can't fix wanting to be ethical, at least not once they make it into a position of leadership. Unfortunately, the power of leadership calls evil people, and they manage to make their way into leadership positions without ever having any intention of being an ethical leader. Those leaders must be identified and removed from leadership positions. You must be acting on good intentions. You have to be focused on being the good in the world and making positive change. You can't be emotional. You can't let your anger, greed, fear, or peer pressure influence your decisions. Finally, you must be able to think rationally. You must understand the facts and issues, make the decision, and then follow through. Ethical leadership requires you to do the right thing. The city leader I opened this episode with didn't respect their people. They didn't care about their community. They kept decisions behind closed doors and lied to their constituents. Anyone who tried to hold them accountable was forced out, and they cared little for the laws of the land, but only their own power. They were not an ethical leader, and the city suffered for it. As your leadership journey progresses, you must strive to be a leader of integrity, honesty, and purpose. You must keep your people in the forefront of your mind, and you must focus on ethical leadership. That's the type of leadership we deserve in law enforcement. That's the type of leadership we need in law enforcement. And that's the story we have to tell.
Thank you for joining. As always, I'm curious what questions you're getting asked. What isn't the news covering? What story needs to be told? Connect with me at bluecanarypodcast@gmail.com.